But he has a guest on from Red China, a Red China analyst who lives over in Red China, and they were talking about the growth, the incredible growth of the Red Chinese economy and how in so many years it would be greater than America's. And then the guy said, you know, Larry, that Goldman Sachs has gone in and built 200, that's a bank, right, a bank. But Goldman Sachs, he says, has built 200,000 gigantic warehouses throughout Red China. He says these warehouses are bigger than any airplane hangar in the world, probably. And Larry Kudlow was shocked, and he said, 200,000 warehouses? Well, what are they putting in those warehouses? He said, oh, they're storing things, rubber, lumber, tin, copper, ore, coal. And then I realized why the coal companies in America are prospering, and their profits are at an all-time high, and the railroads' profits are high. We too are sending all of our coal and our ore and other things to Red China on ships. Now, 200,000. Now, I immediately started doing some research, and when I get to it, I'm a pretty good researcher, not the best in the world, maybe not as good as Alex Jones, but, I'm sort of at the elementary level. I try. But I found out that indeed, to do this, Goldman Sachs, now remember, a bank, one of the largest banks in the world, and they have a huge headquarters in Red China, that Goldman Sachs had bought the previous year the largest warehouse building construction company in the world and put it to work in Red China. Now, what are they storing up all these things for? Why would they have 200,000 warehouses in Red China full of all of these natural resources? Are they expecting a World War III? Do they want to be ready when it occurs? How did they get the money to buy all this stuff? Some terrible things are happening. And Alex, when you go to Europe now, we are told, now you think of it, now there's $800 trillion of CD debt swaps, most of them still out there. And that's the reason they were marketed around the world because of the subprime loans and all that. These $800 trillion, and Bob Chapman has done a great job of exposing this on your show, you and he, of these CD debt swaps. And, of course, they were marketed everywhere. They failed, and now they have yet to be covered. Now we're being told that Greece, that the whole world is teetering on the edge of utter financial collapse because of a little country named Greece of 14 million, the size of, say, Arizona, and its major export is what? Olive oil? But they're telling us that through contagion, or a virus, you might say, a financial virus, that banks everywhere around the world might be connected, and if Greece falls, the sovereign nation of Greece, then the whole world system may fall. And it brings me back to Alan Greenspan, who, and I in my new book, I quote him, and in 12 different speeches he used the term creative destruction. What we need is creative destruction. They coined a new term. They're going to destroy everything, but on the ashes, like the phoenix that comes out, they're going to create this new world order. But listen, this is hokey. What if Greece didn't exist tomorrow morning? The whole world would go on. I mean, I'd be very sorry for the Greek people. But I mean, olive oil, 14 million people. Come on, something is going on big here. They need a pretext. They need an excuse. But Greece is not going to break the whole world. If it didn't exist tomorrow morning, it wouldn't affect the world, except unless somehow it's the fuse of the dynamite. Now, there we have a whole different system, and maybe they're not as incompetent in fixing this Greek situation as they appear to be. Maybe, in fact, this is the first salvo of World War III in terms of financial war. So I'm just very concerned.
No, Texe, continue covering that.
Well, we see these things. We see this global network of criminal organizations. We see this Fed that probably has given out $50 trillion And, we're worried because our federal debt's going to be $3 trillion, right? Oh, we're going to be $3 trillion in debt this year. How are we going to cover that $3 trillion, whatever it is? Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve goes out and just loans people at 0 or 1/4% interest with no collateral around the world over $50 trillion. And I have the bank audit, thanks to Ron Paul, that shows where 17 trillion of it went. What an amazing amount. Who would have ever thought that the printing presses could do such an impressive... And by the way, it wasn't just the Fed, one little old bookkeeper sitting there. They went out and hired 50 or 60 other banks and accounting companies to do the disbursements. I mean, they were lending out money so fast. When the big recession hit in 2008, they couldn't handle it all themselves. They had to go out and hire other banks to lend all the Fed's money they were printing to other banks. It was the biggest distribution. In fact, I think they have lent out more money in the last 3 years than has been created since, caveman days. I mean, can you imagine? That's how much they've lent out. Now, they will not tell us. The only congressman, other than Ron Paul, that's done a good job on this is that the Congressman Alan Grayson. And you can say what you want to. He's a liberal Democrat, but he sure embarrassed the chief counsel of the Fed and Ben Bernanke a little bit. But, by the way, they made sure he was put out of office the next election, Alan Grayson of Florida.
No, we've interviewed him. By the way...
All right. Good.
By the way, I want to shift gears here for a minute. I'm normally listening to you, Texe, while you're talking, but Jesse Ventura just called me back again. The TSA has ruled against his lawsuit. He can't even have a day in court for the TSA grabbing his genitals. What do you make of all this martial law garbage and open internet censorship talk and FEMA takeovers of media? I mean, it's getting crazy.
Well, it is. Even during the Bush days, we knew of the spending. They initially announced $400 million to build, what we would call concentration camps. And this relates, as you've done so many times, a great job, the continuity of operations program. There absolutely is that program. And all of this, of course, has been planned. And the amazing thing is how much money they've spent on it. I mean, obviously, many hundreds of billions of dollars to develop these systems, and the Justice Department is covering all of this up as well. I'm sorry to hear that about Jesse Ventura, but it shows you that even the courts are not going to stop the out-of-control police state. And the only thing that will stop it is programs like Alex Jones growing gigantic, without, and I want to repeat this, without the big billionaires that are giving money to the Herman Cains, the Romneys, and even Rick Perry, and of course Barack Obama. He's got a money machine going too. All of these people are built up for their little jobs, and they will continue this new world order in the crash of the world's system. I think one of the scariest things, though, Alex, I've heard, is not just TSA, but these rural collectivities, rural councils to control our food and the farming system that Barack Obama has set up. Now, this goes all the way back to, Lenin and his new economic...
Oh, they're setting up these rural councils, governors' councils. I mean, this is right out of the Soviet Union.
It absolutely... I wish people would go back and get old books about the Soviet Union, truthful books, that explain how the communists, Lenin, Stalin, Kaganovich, and Trotsky, and the others... first, we have to understand the bankers put those communist monsters in office. We need to understand that New York, German, British bankers put these people, Lenin and the others, paid them millions of dollars and sent them on this horrible escapade into Soviet Russia. And they grabbed the hair of that entire empire and turned it into a killing machine. And I see the same pattern. Everything.
They're gearing up. Texe, I got to say this now because I mean it. This is now life and death, and I want your analysis. There is no doubt that a red terror domestic police force total gutting of America, where the New World Order wants to rewrite this country and really break the will of the nation, is being set up. But as great as the Russian people are, this is not a bunch of poor farmers in the ice tundra of Siberia who never had a history of freedom. Our founders left us with the hundreds of millions of guns. It is not going to go that way, but they're playing the same old playbook of communism. And my God, I mean, I pray to the Lord this gets reversed, but this is a collision course towards violence, because there's a lot of people, and I'm talking about 50 to 100 million, who are going to end up fighting. And I don't think these chicken neck globalists, all these pot-bellied little perverts, realize what's going to happen to them, Texe. It is the incredible restraint that has stopped violence, not weakness. There is an army of loving, compassionate people who make the worst globalist killer look like a wimp, literally waiting with giant armaments for an absolute assault on evil.
You know, Alex, I believe you're right. And they don't compare with the Occupy groups. All these people that don't really know what they're doing, that have been aroused, and many of them don't even know why they're there.
No, the Patriots know exactly who they're going to hit.
Yeah, and even the Tea Party people, bless their hearts, they're good people, very well-intentioned, but as you know, they have been used as well. And in fact, they're the cheerleaders for the 7 wars we're fighting over in the Middle East. So they're not going to be much help to us either. But I agree with you. The Red Terror will start, but when it does, there may be a decided difference in what happened with the peasants in the Soviet Union. But I will say this. You know, you mentioned the TSA, and there are all these other, everything from mind-reading machines to the Predators. You know, Rick Perry wants to have these Predators. Well, you know what they're really going to be used for. They're not going to be used to stop the Mexicans from coming over. But I do believe they will have the Mexican drug cartels and line them up and turn them into killers against us. I think that's probably the real reason for the Fast and Furious thing, to break down the borders, to bring in gun control laws, and say we have to do it because these, as you know, these drug cartels have got a hold of these guns. The laws are too loose, and so we're going to have to tighten up things, and we're going to have to end the Second Amendment. That's what they'd like to do, but there are already too many guns out there. I mean, people, your show's been on how long, Alex? And I bet
17 years.
17 years. There might be 10 million Americans that have bought guns after listening to your show, and I don't blame them one bit. So good for you. And by the way, that is a right to keep and bear arms. In fact, our founding fathers said that's the key. That's the key to freedom, is to be able to put down the government when it turns into a dictatorship. And I know that sounds extreme, and I'm not calling for it. I think it should be the last thing we do. But once the order is given for this Red Terror, remember, the Soviet Union had around 200 million people in 1917. 200 million. 66 million perished. 66 million. Hey, that made Hitler 6 million or whatever look like a picnic. I mean, 66 million out of 200 million. Now, we have 320 million people or so. That would mean over 100 million that would perish if this Red Terror really got going. Now, I think the Soviet people were shocked about it. They couldn't believe it was happening. But everything is happening just like it happened in the Soviet Union. And at first, of course, they were going to give the people freedom and freedom from the czar and all. But it turned out just absolutely horrible. And these were madmen. These were psychopaths. You know, just recently, Alex, one of the things I've really been, you know, my background, you know, I taught psychology for a number of years, as well as, you know, political science and American government for 3 different universities. More recently, I've really been studying the field of psychopathy, the psychopath. And, you know, there's actually a test. Dr. Robert Hare, a Canadian psychiatrist, developed a test some years ago called the Hare inventory, where you can take a test, or you can give a person a test, even without their knowledge, and determine whether they're a psychopath.